Christine Janks, along with her husband Barry Janks, operates the Carson Springs Wildlife Conservation Foundation. Christine grew up in Lake Forest, Illinois. She is a thoroughbred racehorse trainer by profession, one of the first successful females in that profession. She served 2 terms as president of the Illinois Thoroughbred Owners and Trainers Association and is the only woman to have served as a director of the National Horsemen's Association. She is a pilot, former talk radio host, the author of many articles on animal responsibility and welfare, and is on the board of the DeVilt Cheetah Trust and the Korhomo Foundation. Welcome, Christine.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
I should tell the folks that are watching that I sent our videographer, Alan Yetter, out to your place last week, and he came back just smiling from ear to ear with great stories of what he saw there. Before we get into the details about your facility here in Gainesville, though, tell me, when did you first get interested in exotic animals?
Well, actually, though I've been in the horse business my whole life, and an animal sort of, depending on who you talk to, not crazy cat lady, whatever, cheetahs have always been my favorite animal. And people go, you know, there's a wide range of knowledge about it. So some people go, cheetah, is that the one with spots? And so in 2001, I was thinking, you know, we usually take a vacation after the summer race meet for a short time. And I said to my husband, Barry, he was watching a football game and wasn't paying a lot of attention, you know, we could go to Africa and see cheetahs. And he went, oh, yeah, okay. So I got on the phone and I made all the plans. And actually, we paid for the tickets the night before 9/11.
Oh, really?
And then there was that shock. So sort of your knee-jerk reaction is, oh, well, we're not going to travel, we can't go. And we were scheduled to go like a month later. And I just said to myself, oh, you know, that's ridiculous. We're not going to let some terrorists stop us from, or at least I'm not going to, from my dream. And so a month later, off we went to South Africa.
And did you know when you were going to South Africa, had you researched where the cheetah information was?
Well, I'd actually come across an ad in the National Geographic for the DeVilt Cheetah Trust. And I said, well, this is where they are, this is where we're going. So I called the travel agent and I said, I want to go to this place. And they had an inn or a lodge that they were just opening. Actually, we were the first guests. And she came back to me and she said, oh, you need to do this safari and you need to go to this place. I said, you don't understand. I'm only going to see cheetahs. Now, if a giraffe walks by or a rhino or something, I'm going to stop and look at it.
You won't complain.
No, I'll stop and look at it. But I only care about going to this place. And then there was one other sort of backup cheetah place that I found. And so she said, well, it's $40 a night, and there's 2 meals included. The place has got to be terrible. And I said, I don't care. I said, I'm sure the sleeping bag is fine. I want to go and see the cheetahs. And so off we went. And it was really a life-changing experience.
You remember that moment when you first saw one?
I do. I'm actually getting chills right now just thinking about it, because it was sort of funny that we arrived on a Sunday and we had a driver take us up this little dirt road. He had trouble finding it. And we went up this little dirt road on this sort of hill country about an hour and a half out of Johannesburg. And he's looking at us and he says, "Is you sure this is where it is, or where you want to go?" And I go, "I don't know. If this is where it is, this is where we want to go." And so what I didn't realize is they were closed on Mondays, and they only had this one last tour on Sundays. So we go up the hill and we get up there, and they're sort of holding the tour waiting for us because we'd been calling with directions. And so they were very nice, and we got on the tour and we went around and took the whole tour. And then, as these things do, they drop you at the gift shop when you get done. And they have the, I'm well wise to that now. And then they have an adopt a cheetah or something like that. And so I said to the woman that was running it at the time, the tours, Marilyn, who's now a friend of mine, and I said to her, okay, we want to adopt a cheetah. And I said, Barry, get the rand out. Whatever the biggest cheetah adoption you have, that's what we want to do. And so she told us what it was, which was, pretty minimal amount of money. Uh-huh. And so then we said, I said, okay, I want to see the cheetah that I adopted. Well, it kind of doesn't work that way. But so she says, well, it doesn't work that way. And I go, yeah, but I want to see the cheetah I adopted. I said, well, we'll adopt 2, or we'll double it, whatever it takes, because I've come 10,000 miles.
How many do we have to adopt to see them?
Right, I've come 10,000 miles. And so I had done research on Ann Van Dyke, who subsequently ended up being my partner. Or I'm her partner.
Now, is this her facility where you are right now in this story?
And see, fate intervenes in the strangest ways, because she's never there on Sundays. She hates the public. And I look up the hill, and she's standing on the walkway, sort of between the public area and the private area, and I see her. And so I just jumped over the little fence and went running up the hill. And
a Hollywood moment there.
I know, and I ran up, and I was like, had to talk really quick because Marilyn is barreling up there behind me, and Barry's kind of going, what is she doing now? And I run up there and I go, I've come all the way from the United States, and cheetahs, and I've read your book, and I'm just talking as fast as I can, and I'm literally in tears. Mm-hmm. And she smiled, and she took my hand, and she took me into a pen and sat me down next to a cheetah.
Really?
And it was just, they have a lot different rules there about those things. And so that was it. I mean, it was just a life-altering moment. And they were closed the next day, so we ended up hanging around, and she was very gracious, and we talked to the curator, Alan, who's now also a friend of ours. And we spent some time with them, and then she said, well, we're closed tomorrow, but we're going to be scoping some cheetahs and doing some things. Would you like to come back? Would I like to come back?
Do I have to leave?
Right. And so we went off to the lodge and got to go back the next day. But just one other thing, once this was all done for the day, I kind of went out and sat on the lawn, and I'm on this sort of low mountain in South Africa, and I'm looking over some lights, and I'm looking over the thing, and I'm sitting there, and I just sat down and I burst into tears. And Anaki, who was running the lodge at the time, came running out, and she looked at Barry and said, what did you do to her? And it was just tears of joy. Uh-huh. It was just an amazing experience.
Well, I've got chills now, too. Now, you ended up going into business with Ms. Van Dyke?
Yes, she has what I call the in-town facility, which is in Pretoria, and that's where most of the tours take place. And she sort of has smaller animal park there. Mm-hmm. And she also had a partner in a farm out in the country where a lot of the cheetah rescues took place, and leopard rescues, and some of the cheetahs were bred. And her partner was looking to get into a hunting farm type thing, and she didn't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And they do tours there that are what I would say similar to like Lion Country Safari or something. And so we bought her partner out, and then we're partners with her for like 4 years on it, which is really where I got all my exotic animal experience.
When I was reading about your remarkable lives that you and Barry have led, I remember reading something that you found it difficult, I guess, to do business there, or you ran into some obstacles in doing business there?
It is difficult when you're here and you're thousands of miles away. And probably the biggest obstacle was Ann and I are very much alike, and that is that we're sort of obstinate and set in our ways. And when you put two women like that in business together and they have a little different views, and what I was hoping to do is to bring the American marketing skills to the farm and generate more income that we would put back into cheetah conservation.
Right.
And to Ann, and I may have been the same way if I was in her shoes, but to Ann, I was sort of the American that wanted to change everything. Right. And so we did butt heads a lot on things, and it just became problematic. Plus, there was the 17-hour plane ride to get
Yes.
there.
It's quite a commute.
Yes.
So at some point, you decided to look into your own facility and
Right. She bought us out,
Uh-huh.
and we decided that here in Gainesville, in the corner of Alachua County, we could
were
do
you already
something.
living here at this time?
I've owned the land here since
okay.
the late 70s, and had always planned to retire here.
Oh.
One of my racehorse clients lives just around the corner in Bradford County.
Okay.
And when we were driving around, we saw a piece of property for sale and looked at it, and this is way back in the late 70s.
So you weren't thinking wildlife sanctuary?
No,
at that
no,
point.
I was, that kind of came after I got a taste of it. And actually, we considered moving to South Africa for a while.
Oh.
And there was another person that had sort of a wildlife orphanage nursery, and she would get orphaned rhinos and orphaned hyenas and all of those and raise them to be re-released. And that was really interesting to us. And it just was a little too much.
So it was around 2004-ish that you started making plans about the sanctuary in Alachua County?
Actually, we got our first animal in 2007. So we really,
2007?
and
Okay.
that I was still mostly in Chicago during the summers. We couldn't really do it as long as we were only here part-time. And so from about 2008 is when we really started going full blast.
So you built a home on your property. I know you also still continue to work with horses on your property. And then you built whatever you had to build to take that first animal in.
Yes, we started building our own enclosures. I do the enclosure design, and
Oh.
some of the guys that work out there do most of the heavy lifting.
And I want to talk about that in some more detail because it's pretty remarkable what you've done with those enclosures. But who was the first animal?
His name was Takata, and he was a serval, which is like a small cheetah. And they are sold in the pet trade. And this lady had bought one thinking she would have it as a pet in an apartment. And of course that didn't work out, and she had to give it up to a sanctuary. And so that was she had researched sanctuaries and places, and we were just starting to sort of be known, and she came and visited us and decided that that was where she wanted to put him.
Is that a common story? Is that where you get a lot of your animals?
We get a lot more requests than we can handle. That is a problem. People abandoning animals of all kinds, from dogs and cats to exotic animals, and the lack of commitment is problematic.
I thought having a tiger was a good idea, but I think can't handle it anymore.
Right. Well, even the smaller cats, that
Right.
exotic cats, they're not that big, but they're not temperamentally designed to. The difference between a domestic animal like a dog or a cat is it wants to be with you.
Right.
And an exotic animal can be conditioned to accept you. There's a difference. Given the choice, for the most part, they would choose not to be with you. So I've tried to explain that to the groups that come out there, and try to get people not to get inappropriate animals for pets.
How many animals do you have right now?
Well, there's about 50 exotic animals, and then I'm responsible for about 60 horses.
And not all cats, right?
No, we have a giraffe
Mm-hmm.
and some antelope. Actually, we have some scimitar horned oryx that are extinct in the wild. And we have some tortoises, and we try to have some touching animals so that when the school groups come out, there's actually something that they can touch. Touching tigers is not suggested.
When you were a young girl, did you ever think you'd say, I have a giraffe?
Well, actually, no, but I did have about everything else in my room. My mother used to tell me, just keep the door closed. I can't stand it anymore. Because I'd bring home every stray. I was raising orphan mice and wasps at one point in the window. Whatever I could found that I figure I'd try raising it.
Tell me, what is the international species survival effort? I know you're involved in that.
Yes, it's CITES it's a group that tries to manage all the endangered wildlife populations, and they make suggestions on breeding and keep records. There's an international stud book, for instance, on cheetahs, and the parentage and the lineage of every cheetah is registered in there. And so if any cheetahs are being bred, they'll want them bred to as much an outcross as possible to keep as healthy a gene pool and diverse genetics as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so through that effort, a lot of times you'll see in the paper that zoos are transferring an animal to one place or another. That's why they're doing it. The National Zoo may send a leopard to the San Diego Zoo because the female at the San Diego Zoo is a good genetic match. And that's sort of managed by, it's like a commission of animals, like the baseball commissioner that sort of runs everything. They sort of run all the exotic animal, not the exotic animal, the endangered species breeding.
So your animals get to take little vacations.
Well,
here
we aren't up to that point yet,
Oh, okay.
but we're flattered and
Uh-huh.
and proud that we are included in that.
When you started off, did you have a size or a number of animals in mind, or has it just kind of grown organically based on need? And
Well, you really have to learn to say no. And the one thing I had in mind is that the trouble people get into is they don't say no. And there's always going to be a greater need than there's going to be available space.
right.
And available funds. Funding is a huge thing. And we try, I'm also a believer that everybody, including the animals, have to work for a living. And so we try to use them for education. We use their stories to explain to people about commitments to animals, about the importance of species diversity, about the importance of nature. We don't use any pesticides. I explain to people how spraying for mosquitoes just ultimately causes there to be more mosquitoes, for instance, and those kind of things. And so having an animal in that setting gets people's attention, and so you can more effectively, I think, transmit information to people.
You ought to come take part in the mosquito conversation that happens around here every year. You know, you mentioned cost.
We have very few mosquitoes, by the way.
Good. Those cheetahs, so.
Well,
How, you know, I don't want to get into detail of exactly how much it costs, but obviously it's an expensive endeavor. How are you set up to, you're a nonprofit corporation,
yes,
is that
we're a
correct?
nonprofit, IRS, registered, everything is USDA licensed, Fish and Wildlife licensed, Alachua County licensed.
I went back and looked at the 2011 meeting where you got that, I think it was a special exception.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, well, everybody sort of gets a little nervous when you're talking about big cats and things like that. But,
I understand that.
well, I don't really, it's mostly a lack of knowledge,
Right.
because they don't ever hurt anyone in the public. The very rare occasions, many, many more people are seriously injured by their own dog than are by a tiger. But in the very few instances where it does occur, it's always a keeper or the person that's involved as a caregiver, and
Right.
it's through carelessness or not following protocols. And so there's an assumed risk there. It's not that there's a tiger running down Main Street snapping off people's arms.
So it would be safe to say that you encourage donors and
Well,
angels?
no,
and
we're totally privately funded. We donate all our time and efforts. We donate our land. We donate considerable money of our own.
Right.
We do have on our website a place where people can make even a small monthly donation on your credit card. I mean, even if it's just a couple dollars a month, if it's enough people, it's a significant amount of money. And so when you're feeding 100 pounds of raw meat a day, it gets expensive, and we do get donations of meat. We have volunteers that come out and do everything from cut up fruit to lay tile in the animal buildings. And you know, if someone wants to volunteer and they've got a special skill or just interested in showing up every week, it doesn't really help us if you come once or twice every once in a while, because
just to see the animals.
Well, you know, we have to, you know, train you, and we have to do things, and then if you aren't going to show up in the long term, that takes away from animal care.
When I was reading about you online, the one thing I kept running across was how valuable you felt your volunteers were to you.
Oh, no, absolutely. Matter of fact, Judy Mindrum, who's been a long-term volunteer, just got us a donation of over 2,000 pounds of chicken that we just unloaded today. We went to Jacksonville, and thank you, Tyson Foods, for the donation of chicken. And other donors have done equally huge things in other areas. Ulrich Construction's been great to us in helping with buildings and things, and so, and you know, we just get whatever we can, and sometimes it's just a volunteer calling around and asking people for things, and it all takes time.
I also was reading about how careful you are to kind of diversify their diets so they don't get bored, and that you spend a lot of time thinking about that aspect of it.
Well, each animal does have a specific diet, and that's tailored to that exact animal. And we watch their weights and try to keep them at a healthy weight. It's not healthy for them to get too fat either, and we also have people that play with them and people that entertain them. And you know, you can run around and entertain a tiger without ever going in the enclosure, and they think it's fun, people think it's fun. And like the lemurs, we have lemurs, they get 5 to 7 different fruits a day.
Oh, okay.
And that's a big volunteer job, cutting up fruit.
Right.
And they only get low iron fruits, so there's only certain fruits that they can eat. So
I was particularly impressed when I saw some of the video, and I went on your website and saw some of the pictures, that these animals aren't trotting around on concrete pads, that they've got kind of a more natural
Right. No,
habitat.
I would never keep an animal on concrete. And first of all, it's not as healthy because germs get trapped in the little crevices, and you really can't clean it very well. And dirt and grass is a natural antibacterial, and things filter down through it. So no, all our enclosures have the ones that will tolerate bushes. The tigers are a little hard on bushes. They like to rip them out. But
it's their prey.
they get great big stands, and so everything has trees, and it's got natural shade and grass, and are big enough. Matter of fact, we're just getting ready to finish a couple big tiger pools, so a couple of them will have their own swimming pools.
How can the public, I know you're not a zoo, you know, that folks can't just show up and, you know, pay their admission and go in, but how do you interact with the public? What is the process?
We get inquiries by email. Basically, that's what we prefer. Sometimes people phone. And we do private tours for donors and sponsors. And we also do some school and church groups and camp groups, and we try to do a lot of education. I'm a big believer that kids are way out of touch with nature, and it's alarming to me, considering the way I grew up and the things that I did out in nature in the woods, and things that I don't think kids are getting today. And so a lot of them really aren't that interested, but every group has a few kids that are just, I think they tell me, I've got many schools that have told me, the teachers and the parents, it's the best field trip their kids have ever taken. So we're proud of that. And so emailing me, Christine at carsonspringswildlife.org, and ask about a tour, and depending on what you want, we figure out how to do it.
I would love to see the look on a child's face who's not had much interaction with nature when they see a tiger on the other side of the fence.
Well, yeah, actually, the kids seem to like the littler animals
Oh,
better.
really?
A lot of times you'll think, oh, here's the tigers, and they're like, oh, can we go back and see the tortoises again? and the
That's funny.
foxes, we have some Fish and Wildlife calls us when they have animals to confiscate or orphan animals, and when we can, we take those. So we have a couple cougars and we have a couple gray foxes, and the foxes will lick your hand, and the kids love the foxes. They love the tortoises. They love the lemurs. Not as many of them are interested in the bigger cats. That's more of an adult toy.
That's what I thought of first. Well, let me ask you, we're almost out of time. I just would love to have another half an hour with you, but I know that you're not a breeder per se.
No.
And you're not involved certainly in the pet trade or any of those things. How do you feel in general about the laws in the United States or elsewhere, but I guess specifically here, that allow the kinds of pet ownership of these exotic animals? Do you have strong feelings in that regard?
Actually, I do. I think people should be allowed to have them. I just think the standards need to be raised. And one of these days, I'm probably going to make some unhappy people, because I'd like to propose that Fish and Wildlife raise the caging enclosure standards to a much larger size. I think they're way too small. I think the minimum, the caging square footage is way too small for tigers. And that doubling or tripling that, and doubling or tripling the number of acres that you need to keep them on, would eliminate the marginal people. And it's not any different than dogs or cats. There's people that don't treat their dogs well. They have them tied on a chain in their backyard. They don't treat their cats well. And there's wonderful people that have exotic animals and do a great job with them. So there isn't any more bad tiger owners than there are bad dog owners. It's really the people. And if we had a way to weed out the people that shouldn't have them, it shouldn't be just paint everybody with the same brush.
I see. Well, it was really fascinating talking to you.
Well, this has been great, and I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to sort of tell a little bit of our story.
I'm jealous of my videographer because he got to go visit you, so I'm gonna
Well, you
have
can
to come
come
out
visit
next.
too.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I was tired of my life, and I started drinking to deal with it. So I talked to my best friend.
Everything was falling apart. I just couldn't take it anymore. So I talked to my girlfriend.
No matter what I did, I was never good enough. So I talked to my coach, and we went to this website.
These are examples of mental health issues.
There are people out there who care about you.
They can help. Just talk to them.
Who can you talk to?
To find out more, go to whatadifference.org and click on Learn.